put off by how long this video is, don't worry, I try to jam-pack my videos with as much content and as much detail as I possibly can. Anything I feel I can comment on and that I feel you might be interested in, I pretty much put in the video. I try not to repeat myself and talk fairly fast. Das Boot, the director's cut movie review. Starting with the plot. I'm basically just going to go with the opening prologue here. La Rochelle, France, autumn 1941. Germany's vaunted U-boat fleet with which Hitler hoped to blockade and stamp out Britain is beginning to suffer its first major setbacks. British freighters are now sailing the Atlantic with stronger and more effective destroyer escorts, inflicting heavy losses on the U-boats. Nevertheless, the German High Command orders more and more U-boats with ever younger crews into battle from their ports in occupied France. The battle for control of the Atlantic is turning against the Germans. 40,000 German sailors served on U-boats during World War II. 30,000 never returned. And because I can't not, I am going to briefly comment on the Justice League, character teasers. They said they were also going to do a trailer. I guess not yet, because the only one that they showed was the one that they already showed a while back. And I basically, to briefly restate what I said, it makes it look like a comedy which has superheroes more than a superhero movie that has comedic parts. They're way too scared that people are going to think that they're not funny because, oh, too dark DCU, which it has been. But that's really not the problem, and you really don't want people to, it's not going to win over any fence sitters, I don't think. They needed to show way more of, like, compared to like Civil War trailers. Anyway, yeah, to briefly comment on the character teasers, I couldn't help but notice that of all of them, the last one was Cyborg, because nobody gives a crap about Cyborg. And I say that as someone who actually kind of used to. Of course, Aquaman was first to get him out of the way. And it's sad that they thought the Wonder Woman should be second to last, but Batman was second. And I can't help but think that Zack's Batman suit looks just like Night Owl's, his Night Owl's, which in turn looked like the Dark Knight's. And, Trump just said that people don't like Trump here because they only saw phase 1. I don't know, it looked like number 2 to me. On plot. I am reviewing specifically the within credits 200 minutes or 3 hour 20 minutes, without credits 3 minutes shorter director's cut. I don't know if it's, I've seen numbers that say it's 3.5 hours long. I don't know, it almost can't be an NTSC versus PAL thing. It shouldn't be that much of a difference. I don't know, I guess with 3 hours it gradually increases. I don't know, maybe that's it. Maybe people are saying, oh, well, 25 minutes is essentially 30 minutes. I don't know. Anyway, I don't think I've watched any other version. I certainly haven't watched the even longer version. If I could, I would. And I am basing this on the original German with English subtitles, not one of the dubbed versions. I do appreciate that since the cast all, were fluent in English as well, they dubbed their own parts, and that the whole film is dubbed anyway because they couldn't film the camera and the echo effect it made, and I'm really glad that they did dub it, because I can totally imagine, 1980s camera, especially a camera that was small enough to fit in the submarine. Yeah, the sound was just, intolerable. As Actually, I'm not 100% certain if they did at all record audio there, or they just... Anyway, nevertheless, I know that a lot of people don't like watching, movies where they also have to read along. I have to say, with both the film's name and its status as a foreign film, even if you'd be making an exception in this case, I implore you to watch this subtitled film. I had to. I had to. And they made an effort to make sure that not only were there, like, I think the wiki says standard German speeds. Yeah, if that's how you say it. I don't want to offend anyone with it. Yeah, and dialect speakers, and yeah, Wolfgang Peterson states in the DVD commentary, young men from throughout Germany and Austria were recruited. Were put in the film because it would reflect the diversity of the Third Reich around 1941, and yeah, I really appreciate that, and I'm afraid I know almost no German, so I couldn't necessarily really tell, but it's one of those things. It's texture. Even if you don't like pick it up, it's still there. It makes it more interesting, and I'm not sure I've ever watched... Well, the DVD commentary track is recorded with the American one, but you can just barely hear it over the actual commentary. I'm not sure. I mean, I guess they could, but it seems like it would be weird if they, like, I don't know, spoke in, like, maybe some of them used Southern accents. I'm not picking on Southerners here. I'm not trying to, at least. And, some of them maybe had a British accent or something. You can't do that in English when it's when it's not the right language for the... Okay, now I definitely offended someone. No, if it's not the same language as originally, that's just... and it's... Yeah, they might even get into, like, the same kind of really awkward territory of, like, the the girl with the dragon tattoo, or Men Who Hate Women. Yeah, it really is weird that they retitle it. I don't know, Men Who Hate Women, is that not... that really tells you what kind of, kind of the tone and the kind of people it's about. Anyway, yeah, that movie, the American remake, my only real problem with that movie is that they go for these awkward Swedish accents. Look, the original movies were in Swedish, and it's not... I mean, it didn't need to be Sweden the way this needed to be Germany, and I do appreciate that they didn't, like, change it into being America instead of Sweden. It does bring something into it that it is Sweden. They were trying to sweeten the deal. And yeah, the dialogue spoken on set would have been drowned out by the gyroscopes for the special camera, developed for filming. And Hollywood tried to make this movie, but they had problems with the author of the autobiographical book this is based on, and a part of the problem was that they wanted there to be American characters in the film. Just the sheer unadulterated ethnocentrism of that. It doesn't shock me. If I didn't expect it, it would. I am thrilled that they didn't get to make that film and that we got this one instead. And yeah, it is somewhat fitting that I record this so close to the Ghost in the Shell premiere, since Hollywood is still doing that thing where just... it's a Japanese... it's the same character. The character's name is still the Japanese... just... it's an American-made film. Is that really not enough? Do they need a white person's face? I guess, you know, if the protagonist is going to be a woman, it at least has to be a white woman. We can't go female and Japanese. Because, I mean, where would you find a single Asian American actress who can do action? That's just, if Hollywood producers didn't think they could make this film without having American characters in it, they should just upfront decide not to pursue the film at all. I understand their fears, and they may be justified, that Americans wouldn't go watch an American-made film with no American characters back then in large enough numbers to make not only its budget, but also profit. And moving on to characters. Jürgen Prochnov, and this is also the movie that kind of made, it opened doors for him. It made, he's been in American movies since this. And yeah, he stars as the captain called the Old Man by his crew. He's 30 years old, but he's really battle hardened, and to them, he's almost like an old man. He's good-hearted and sympathetic, and he's frustrated that most of his crews are boys. That, they should be out living. They shouldn't be stuck in this. Yeah, he's pragmatic and cynical. And you can really see why people follow him. And you have the the war correspondent who's naive but honest, and he's there to gather photographs of them in action, bring back to use for Nazi propaganda purposes. And there's this early scene where he's like running, they're doing this really hard, arduous work on the boat, and he's like saying, okay, get out, okay, hold that pose, and taking pictures, and they tolerate it for a little bit, and then someone throws an oily rag in his face, and yeah, then he kind of realizes he's done taking pictures for that. Yeah. And there's the stiff, scarily determined political officer, and there's this, they at one point early in the film, they put on the British song "It's a Long Way to Tipperary," that the crew all sing along to kind of mock their enemy. And he's the one asked to put on the record, and the captain points out to him, putting on one record will not make you the King of England. And by the end, these attractive 18-year-old faces are bearded, because why bother? Paler from lack of sunlight, just like it was in real life. And they actually did. They filmed it in sequence, which is extremely unusual for a major motion picture. Like, you'll see art movies do that kind of thing, like small independent films. But big budget, yeah, that takes a lot of planning, and they weren't really allowed to go out in the sun, and they didn't really shave, so it's, it looks real, and they can bring in like their own feelings and experiences there for the acting, that yeah, they don't have to, it comes from a very real place. Style. one of the first, I always read other people's reviews in preparation for these to, some to respond to, some to just make sure I mention all the qualities of it. Excuse me. One of the first ones of user reviews, of course, on Rotten Tomatoes that I read said, not as exciting as U-571. And I haven't watched that movie, and I probably will, because David Ayer wrote it, but in spite of the fact that Jonathan Mostoff directed it, but for what little I know, yeah, it's a Hollywood action movie, so obviously that's, but yeah, just talk about missing the point. The film is specifically about that existence on a submarine isn't all that exciting. You want exciting from director Wolfgang Petersen. You watch Air Force One, and I remember Troy as being fairly action-packed, but it's been ages since I watched. The thing I love about Troy is that Wolfgang Petersen did not include the Greek gods because he said he felt that they were completely, they weren't necessary for the plot. And that really, I don't know if he is like an atheist or secularist, or at least like slightly agnostic or something, or if he is like a Christian or something, but that really does sum up, because they aren't. They're personifications of big dramatic things that happen. And yeah, that the ancient Greeks needed that. A lot of cultures have felt the need to put names and deities in the place of these. There has to be a will behind these. The violent sea, yeah, stuff like that. But just, yeah, that's. And I don't currently particularly plan on more Wolfgang Petersen, although I wouldn't rule out. Yeah. The movie has almost no blood, and there are several sequences where, for seconds that go on for eternities, the characters, and thus the audience, breathlessly wait for something. Maybe it's the boat rising for fresh air, a mechanical machine to do what it's built to do, a meter, a visual indicator to change, to show news, even if they're bad, just news, because the waiting is unbearable, the tedium. But in the film itself, like The Road, is never actually boring. It's tense, it's anticipation, and it's suspense. And you can practically smell, even taste, every nasty thing deep down in the boat. All the sweat and, barely washed and clean, all these machines, the grease, yeah. Literally, one of the first things the director's cut does is have a group of drunken sailors pee, technically onto the road, and then onto the windshield of a car of officers, and thus right into the lens, right at us. And the film starts on land, outside of the boat, so we are allowed one last little glimpse of freedom, of fresh air, of open spaces, women, beer, varied food, before the seemingly endless stint on the boat. And the opening is the last big party the men engage in before this long stint on the boat, and they listen to festive music that they wouldn't be able to back in Germany. Once again, this is occupied France. And it includes this proto-Steadicam one-taker that goes around the whole place, where everyone gets really destructive and out of control. And it really, they don't necessarily all fully realize this, but it's the last time they're going to get to be that, human, be that free for an incredibly long amount of time, and what's going to feel like an endless amount of time, because you can't. There's no room for lapses. down in the boat. Again, even the, you know, I mean, it might almost seem to us like a fairly minor thing that, this kid running around taking pictures. I mean, it's not like he's just doing it because he thinks it's fun. It's his job, and it's going to help the war effort. But it's just, yeah, there isn't room for it. And we see them wave goodbye as they sail out of the harbor. And then less than 20 minutes in, we're in the depths of the boat. And this war correspondent, and thus us, are given a guided tour of the entire thing, so we know the geography for the rest of it, how tight and cramped it is, and every time there's an emergency, we know where everything is in relation to everything else. And one emergency happens so suddenly that one sailor bounds out of the bathroom, pants down, you see his butt. The movie is authentic, gritty, realistic, detailed, as close as you get to the experience of being on a submarine outside of the actual experience and or a submarine simulator game or subsim. It's very claustrophobic. You don't merely witness how little room they have to move around, how two men cannot pass each other at certain parts lest they both squeeze up against the wall and move sideways. You experience it. Experience it. Yeah. That word is not supposed to be a tongue twister. I don't know what happened. It's choking, smothering, suffocating. It does not let you go. It's draining, exhausting. And in response to the criticism by novelist Bockheim, which you can find in the Wikipedia entry for the movie, I'm not going to go over everything he said. Just, yeah, I'd personally say that most of what he lists was necessary for it to work as a theatrically released mainstream film. I think it went as far as it could in the direction of realism and such. And the short review. Das Boot, the director's cut short movie review. In 1941, a German submarine, takes off from the occupied French harbor of La Rochelle, and these 18-year-old, German soldiers are going to spend what seems like an eternity down in the depths of this submarine. And the movie really conveys how cramped and uncomfortable and nasty and overly intimate. There's no there's no privacy, there's no room to be alone. The bunks are really tight and close to just, yeah. And it's an incredibly tense and suspenseful movie. There's not an awful lot of action, but it's never boring. And when there is action, it is really, really compelling. And moving on to thoughts. The plot. Let's see. The climax, I'm referring not to the last few minutes of the movie, but when the boat is yeah, the last big scene where, in the boat where there's action and such. As per Murphy's law, every bad thing that could, no, Christopher Nolan, that is what it actually means. Every bad thing that could happen now does. We knew that they could, but we kept saying that they wouldn't because we needed them not to not go mad watching. And now they do. It's incredible setup, payoff, building tension, reaching crescendo, impeccable craftsmanship. And on plot. I to a lot, the ending seems to render the rest of the film meaningless, without point. Why even bother if it all ends so suddenly, tragically, after all of that? All those crewmen, we didn't even see them die. They didn't get a farewell as you expect in a big movie. The a big war movie, you expect the big farewell to every character, that maybe they die doing one last heroic thing, and there's like closure on some kind of like plot thread with them. They die saying, I'll never see her again, and throughout the film that soldier has been showing pictures and talking about how much he misses her, something like that. And no, that's not what happens, because that's war. The film is showing reality. If it makes you feel empty, hollow, hurt to your core, that's intentional. A film like this shouldn't leave you with anything resembling a positive emotion. It couldn't have ended any other way. What would have felt satisfying, concluded the characters. They made it through such dangerous territory. They didn't die at the depth of 280 meters. They made the repairs. They finally leave the confines of the claustrophobic interior, and they and we can breathe again. They're at a friendly port. We even feel safe, but we're not, because it's war. And we've just had, they sang along to It's a Long Way to Tipperary again. We have the, yeah, and it does, yeah, it seems like it's going to be okay, but yeah, that's not, we almost, yeah, we dare to hope, we dare to dream, we think that it's over. The all the awfulness is over. We're past it. There's not, because they made it. That was the goal. The whole point was to get through. I mean, they didn't die crossing the strait. They didn't. It's, yeah. So how could it possibly? But it does, because that's how it goes. Even if you didn't die down there, even if it, I saw some reviewers say it's essentially a tin can. Even if it didn't, because that's, for so many of them, the U-boat was simply sunk. And even if it didn't need to explode or implode, just, if it's underwater and it's not currently rising, you know, you can't get out. You are trapped in there. You can't climb up out of the top of it. As Johan panically tries to do, I saw actually, like, I think the IMDb fact actually said, why did they, what was the problem there? The problem was that if he opened the hatch, they would all drown. They can't, you know, if he opens the hatch, they're not going to get it closed again against all that water pouring in, against the water pressure. We see how much trouble they have with getting the water out after they, but yeah, it's and after all of that, it just does end like that. You know, we the way it's filmed and edited is it's impeccable. You couldn't it's just about perfect. You know, it really it feels like one of those American celebratory scenes where everything is, I mean, they look worn and devastated, but they're alive. They made it. Even the wounded, you know, we see him hoisted up and, you know, put in the, you know, yeah, it's all going to be, and then we hear the air raid siren, and literally everything blows up, and you have bombing runs, strafing runs, and it's just, you know, not absolutely everyone dies that was present. You know, some do get in, you know, some get into safety, but we see so many of them. You know, we recognize their faces, the crew that we've spent all this time with, and who we've really grown to care about, and they're just dead. And, you know, the correspondent reaches the captain, and he's just looking at the boat as it's sinking, and it's just, there's just, it devastates him. And then, yeah, you know, he held on for just long. He had to see if the boat would make, and it didn't. And then he's dead. And yeah, the you know, basically, do we even, we know that the correspondent is still alive, and it, you know, it's autobiographical, so obviously, but other than that, I'm not sure we see anyone else for sure alive. Maybe some of them were in safety, but yeah, and that's how fast it could go, even at a friendly port, even, you know, in seemingly, yeah, that's, please comment, thumbs up, and subscribe for more content.